Hi, I'm Kaya.
And I'm Joanna.
And this is Starlit Citadel Reviews.
Albion's Legacy is an adventure game with an Arthurian theme from Thomas Gofton and Lynn Vander Games.
In Albion's Legacy, players take the roles of figures in King Arthur's court and work together to complete quests. It's playable by 1 to 4 people in 1 to 2 hours.
Players begin Albion's Legacy by choosing a character and collecting the associated character card, destiny tokens, and starting equipment. Next, they choose a story quest and set aside the related story tokens. They lay out the board, sort the remaining tokens and place them near it, and add a number of virtue tiles determined by the number of players.
They sort the cards into face-down decks and place the approaching threat token on top of the severe threat deck. The realm tiles are sorted into a named enemy stack and Albion stack and placed next to the board. The first player is chosen and collects the key turn token, and the game begins.
Now, on their turn, a player can perform any number of actions, including moving, scouting new realm tiles, challenging enemies, completing a story or character-specific challenge, trading inventory items, or activating a realm tile. Players begin the game on the round table tile in Camelot.
A player can move up to 4 spaces on their turn. If they have unspent movement points left, they can also scout new tiles. They choose a direction with an open path and draw a tile from the Albion stack with a back matching their current region. Any unusable tiles go to the bottom of the stack, and the chosen tile is placed adjacent to the current player's tile connected by an opening. Players do not need to move onto the scouted tile.
When a tile with the roaming threat icon is scouted, players draw the top card from the deck with the approaching threat token on it, and then move that token to the other threat deck. The card adds enemy tokens to the board. Named threats are placed on a specific tile, which may need to be drawn and placed in a particular region. Unnamed threats are evenly distributed on tiles of the listed color, with any leftovers placed on hallway tiles in Camelot.
A player must challenge an enemy on their tile before taking any other actions. They choose an attribute from the options associated with that enemy and roll a number of stones of chance equal to their attribute score. Any die showing that attribute symbol counts as 1 success, and a mana burst counts as 2 successes. A challenge succeeds if you roll a number of successes equal to or greater than its rating, and you collect the enemy's token.
Now, if you fail, you can spend 1 destiny token per stone of chance to re-roll them. If you do this, you also choose 1 additional attribute that'll count as a success. Otherwise, you take 1 wound token and then retry the challenge. You can also discard 1 unbroken item to escape to an adjacent tile after taking a wound.
Many items can be broken to avoid a wound. These items are turned upside down and they are unusable until they're repaired. If a character takes more wounds than they have token slots, then that character must be retired. The top virtue plaque is discarded from the top of the stack, and the player must choose a new character for next turn.
If all of the enemy tokens associated with a threat card have been collected, then that card is defeated and the players get 1 quest coin. If the defeated card had a named threat, the player who collected the named threat token returns their tokens to the enemy pool and draws a card from the item, armory, or relic deck. And all the other players with enemy tokens from that card do the same. If a card adds enemies of the same type as another card's to the board, all enemies of that type must be collected before their cards are defeated.
Players may need to complete a challenge to collect a story token or resolve an encounter. Non-enemy encounters do not deal wounds and may be tried once per turn. The first time a player enters an encounter tile on their turn, they must draw an encounter card and resolve it.
Each realm tile has a symbol that marks its function. Encounter and threat tiles activate automatically, while other tiles are activated by the player's choice. Tiles may let players heal wounds or repair damaged gear, travel between non-adjacent tiles, draw new cards from the item, armory, and relic decks, or provide a bonus to all rolls for a specific attribute as long as they're occupied.
The dungeon tile activates a roaming threat and lets a player place enemy tokens in captivity. Once there are 8 enemy tokens in captivity, the players get a quest coin. A virtue tile lets a player collect 1 of the virtue plaques. You can only have 1 at a time. Players can also trade inventory items at will with another character on their tile. Choosing to activate a tile ends your turn.
Once the starting player has completed their second turn, the key turn is triggered. A despair token is placed over one of the 10 flames of hope, and any enemy special abilities on active threat cards are triggered. Enemies move according to the movement patterns listed on their cards, and the key turn token is passed clockwise.
The players win by completing their story quest and by collecting a number of quest coins equal to 3 times the number of characters. They lose if the final flame of hope is extinguished or if the final virtue plaque is discarded from the stack before they succeed.
So Albion's Legacy is a pretty standard adventure game, and that is a genre that absolutely lives and dies by its execution of its theme. I was really interested to see how this game did it because there aren't a ton of Arthurian games out there. There's Shadows over Camelot, which is a little bit adventure-y as well, but they all tend to be a little bit on the shallow side. And I was really impressed with the depth of content in this game. Not only is it everywhere, the characters come with little backstories and with character quests and special abilities that are all specific to their actual stories. The encounters and the threats are all, again, things from Arthuriana, but they also draw on an incredible wealth of material. This isn't just going for, coming from Tennyson or from Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail, although those are both in there. There's a ton of material from the old Welsh stories. There's a ton of material from the medieval romances, from the French and the English ones. And you can tell that this was really put together from a love and a great knowledge of Arthurian lore. It's really immersive. It's incredibly engaging if you're somebody who knows a bit about the Arthurian stories, particularly some of the weirder ones. And it can be very rewarding to see that world come alive around you. I also do really like how this game handles balance. As in most cooperative games, it's important that every player feel important and engaged with what they're doing, and this game accomplishes that in 2 different ways. There's the standard way of making the characters very varied. Every character has a slightly different balance of attributes. They've got some favored enemies that they're a little bit better at fighting, and they also have a unique special ability and an artifact that they can find by completing a special quest. So all of that alone means that every character is probably going to be better at doing certain things and is going to feel valuable. But there's also some really nice balance inherent in the layout of the board and the physical structure of the game. You start out with Camelot, and Camelot has tons of stuff in it. There are realm tiles in there that'll let you collect a lot of items. There are tiles in there that give you those crucial attribute bonuses to other challenges. And it's a really rich space that you want to have people running around and using, and you also want to protect when those monsters inevitably show up in the hallways. At the same time, you've got 3 different directions that you can explore in, and completing your final quest, your story quest, inevitably means that you have to go out and do a whole bunch of exploration. So you do have to split the party, but it actually works in the game's favor because it means that everybody ends up positioned somewhere where they're useful. There's not really anywhere in this game where you're just hanging out and not really doing something. You're either playing an active exploration role, or you're fighting things, or you're a really crucial support feature. And it means that everybody stays engaged during every turn, and you don't get the problem where some players just feel like they're not contributing as much or they're not as important, which is really nice to see. The big difficulty that I had with Albion's Legacy is that it's a real challenge to learn the rules at first. This is not a particularly complex game. It's a little bit fiddly. There's lots of tokens, but that's, again, very typical of the genre. But the rulebook is just not quite where it needs to be. It's short, it's compact. Those are things that I very much appreciate. But they went so much for brevity that there's actually a lot of cases that are just not covered at all in the rules. And I found myself often going back to refer to the rule book in my first learning game and finding that the answers I was looking for weren't there and the situations I was dealing with weren't addressed at all. As a concrete example, there's nothing in the rules anywhere that I can find that talks about how you deal with multiple enemies that are on the same tile, which is a situation that definitely comes up just because of how they move. And that does mean that the game does feel a little bit more challenging to play at first than maybe it should, because this is a difficult game. It's well set up as the kind of cooperative game where everybody really does have to work together to succeed. The challenges are difficult. It's very easy to die because most characters can only take one wound. So there's already this sense of high stakes. There's already this sense that you need to be this well-oiled machine in order to really survive the quests. And when the rules aren't there to really support you doing that, it makes it even more challenging for reasons that have nothing to do with the design and can be quite frustrating.
So another thing to be aware of with Albion's Legacy that comes along with a few of the sort of negatives that Kai was talking about is that the first few times that you play, you have to expect this game to take you an awful lot longer than you think. The side of the box says 60 to 90 minutes. We're saying 1 to 2 hours. Probably the first few times that you play, it's going to take you a lot longer than that. Just because there is sort of a lot of rules to work through, there is going to be a lot of situations where you're going to have to consult the rule book. There's a lot of sort of fiddly tokens, this kind of thing. It is going to be an effort to get through the rules the first time and really get into this game and play it the way that it's meant to be played. That being said, I really enjoyed this game. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of co-op gaming. Anybody who watches this show knows that I am definitely a co-op fan, so I like that. And I like the feel of this game that's the same sort of feel that's in any sort of open world co-op. So you can wander around, it's a bit sandboxy, you can sort of quest out and explore. There isn't really a linear path that you have to follow. There's definitely things that you need to address that pop up or places that are important for you to cover, but there is that feel of sort of open world sandbox wandering, exploring, questing, and I like that. I like that feel for sure. There's also a lot of variation in this game. The story quests themselves are all quite different, so depending on which story quest you choose, it's going to be a different kind of game. There's a bunch of different ways that you can collect your quest coins. There's a bunch of different ways that characters can feel useful and be useful. So I think this game has a lot in it and a lot of replayability because of all of those nice elements that are working together. So I think that this game is fantastic in terms of its theme for sure, and anybody who likes adventure gaming and co-op gaming of this type is really going to enjoy this game, and I think they're going to come back to this game over and over again to play it. However, first you got to get into it, learn the rules, understand how everything plays, and then I think after you get to that point, this is going to be a game that I, for one, would revisit often. I think it would come off my shelf a lot, just because every game that you play is going to be very different.
Ooh, there's some lovely muck down here.